Appreciate your comments as well as the good chair from the House. And you are correct that this is a very controversial issue. And there's good reason that these bills have not come to the floor of the House or have not been voted out through the chamber. And that is because of their controversial nature. And in the second highest, soon to be highest tax state in the nation, it is a real concern to the residents of the state of Connecticut. And that's why, while we are here to represent our districts, this is not a Republican, it is not a Democrat issue. This is an issue for every resident in the state of Connecticut. And as the good Speaker of the House likes to say, I wear a C, not a D or an R. And that's why there is strong bipartisan support against implementing tolls in the state of Connecticut. And we have seen that unprecedented with at least 5 communities so far, more to come, that have actually passed resolutions. When has that ever happened? Over 86,000 signatures and growing on a petition. So much testimony, the majority 9-1 against implementing tolls, that it crashed the system. So yes, this is a controversial issue, no doubt about it. Are we in desperate need of taking action on our infrastructure? Absolutely. But those decisions haven't been taken, and we have the means to be able to do it now, and alternate ways of being able to go against, of being able to do that. So I do actually have a question on Senate Bill 423, and it's around understanding this transportation priority project account. And this is where the question comes from. You may recall in 1984, the Special Transportation Fund was created. And it was created because of desperate need to invest in our infrastructure. It was created solely to back bonding for Governor O'Neill's 10-year infrastructure renewal program. That account, actually those bonds, received favorable rating because there was dedicated funding and there was actually a plan, a solid plan to invest in our infrastructure. But you might recall that because the general fund was in deficit, expenses kept getting moved to the Special Transportation Fund. It started in 1987 with the total costs of the Department of Transportation, which now do account about 43% of expenses out of the Special Transportation Fund. It continued with the pension and benefit costs that started at $19 million and now are over $200 million a year coming out of the Special Transportation Fund. So there was, while this was intended to be a dedicated account, you know, we might disagree if we call it rating the special transportation account, but we can't argue that there have been diversions of money into that account over a period of time that technically, if you can or cannot add it up, comes up to about $650 million. In 2015, because we couldn't stop rating the Special Transportation Fund, it was made statutory. But that didn't have a lot of effect either. So then we had to have voters vote on this last fall to make it a constitutional amendment, to put it into our Constitution. And within 2 months in office, our new governor has swept the Special Transportation Fund. So can you explain to me what the Transportation Priority Project account is, and is this intended to somehow protect money that we continue since its inception trying to protect but haven't successfully been able to do?
Thank you, Representative, and I appreciate the comments. But just let me clarify. You mentioned about the rating of the Special Transportation Fund. And while it has happened in the past where funds were moved from Special Transportation to the General Fund, the last time that had happened was in 2013. So since then, we have not done that. And at the times when monies were moved from the Special Transportation Fund to the General Fund, it was also to make sure that the existing bonds that needed to be paid for those years, the monies were there. It was because we were in a fiscal situation where budgets were trying to be balanced. So the monies were available for the ongoing costs. It hasn't happened since 2013, and many times over those previous years, I believe it was only 2 or 3 times that the STF fund monies had to go to the general fund. More importantly, it was the opposite. It was the general fund's money were put into STF because the STF money didn't have the balance to go forward. But since 2013, that has not been the case. Which brings me to the question of your question about what is the transportation account that we're talking about, the priority projects account. As I mentioned, any toll revenue would go into STF, into the Special Transportation Fund immediately, so then the monies would be protected. Monies to pay for the ongoing debt via STF would exist. Excess monies to that particular line item of the account then would be moved into the Transportation Priority Project, which is part of STF, so the monies cannot be removed, they cannot be taken. Those would be the monies going for the projects articulated in this bill in terms of what needs to be funded for future projects, whether it's the Gold Star Bridge, whether it's the tunnel, whether it's ongoing maintenance, and so forth. So whatever you may need to bond through STF for the 5-year average that you need for the STF to be solvent, you will have excess revenues coming into the STF to pay for the priorities and the infrastructure that are long overdue. So it is an account within the account, so to speak, but it is all STF, it is all directed there, it is all protected, it is all for infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to clarify for the record to your point regarding any funds withheld or swept from the Special Transportation Fund, that in full year 2014, all $172.8 million in scheduled general fund revenue sharing funding for the STF was diverted before it entered the fund. In addition, a direct sweep of STF's cumulative balance occurred, sweeping $76.5 million from the STF. In full year 15, all $172.8 million in scheduled general fund revenue sharing funding for the STF was diverted before it entered the fund. In full year 2016, $37.5 million in scheduled sales tax revenue funding for the STF was diverted before it entered the fund. In full year 2017, $50 million in scheduled sales tax revenue funding for the STF was diverted before it entered the fund. So that may have been in order to balance the general fund, which has been the state of the case of the Special Transportation Fund since it was established. I appreciate your description of what this account is. I know my members have a lot of questions, and they may touch on that, and then we'll come back as well. But thank you very much.